Dystopia warning, obviously. People have been saying to me for years, Tan, you should run for Parliament. You should become an MP. I always laughed and went, nah, you're all right. Because then I had, integrity and a functioning brain. But then the cost of living crisis hit. My sanity nosedived. And somewhere in between, I got kicked in the head by a horse. And suddenly it didn't seem so far-fetched. I mean, look at the qualifications that I now have. A complete lack of shame and self-awareness, an ability to talk nonsense with conviction, and most of my brain missing. I finally have what it takes. Because Reform is a party in which it's possible to make six figures, have multiple side hustles, and all you've got to do is blame immigrants and suffer a severe head injury. So I'm doing it. I'm joining Reform, the only party in which having a frontal lobe injury doesn't just help you to become a politician, it's a prerequisite. Just look at the women that I am joining. Ginderella, disused mannequin, Liz Truss, Anne Widdecombe. Before the accident, I used to think that her hair was a cry for help. But since I decided to run for Reform, all of my gay friends have abandoned me, including my hairdresser. Now I can see her haircut for what it really is. Brave. I've had to make a bunch of new friends, since none of my old friends and most of my family don't want to talk to me anymore. We still find our ways to have fun. My local Reform branch meets in a pub every Thursday, a place that smells like pity. We all get together and try to collectively solve a crossword. We never succeed. Crosswords are now woke. We mostly discuss the decline of British culture whilst drinking Dutch lager, waving flags that are made in China, and eating Nepalese curry, despite believing that immigration is indeed ruining Britain, which is admittedly ironic because none of us can cook a meal without at least 3 imported ingredients. And yeah, I can't do things that I used to do. Can't even watch television. Every time I turn on the TV and I see someone that does not look like me, I get filled with an uncontrollable rage and confusion. So I've had to stop watching television because I've smashed 7. I've realised that as a woman I don't even want rights anymore. If Nigel thinks that women shouldn't be allowed to control their bodies, who am I to argue? I don't even have the function to argue anymore, actually. Before the incident, I used to stand for equality, diversity, inclusion, compassion, empathy. Now I'm no longer capable of empathy, which makes me the perfect candidate. I used to also believe in critical thinking, and now I can't think, and that's why Reform is the party for me. I've even found God, not just because of the event, but conveniently around the time that certain allegations about me have started to surface. Now I wake up every morning and thank the Lord for 2 things: concussion and Nigel Farage. Before the horse, I thought that climate change was real on account of all those floods, all of the intense weather events around the world, the fires, animals dying out. But no, I took a hoof to the temple and suddenly it all made sense. We need to deport the wind turbines. I used to blame things like austerity for the country's problems, which is ridiculous, isn't it? It's evidently people coming here from other countries that don't have a pot to piss in that are the problem. I used to think nurses deserve pay rises, for saving lives. Now I know that the poor deserve to die. Brexit? I used to think it was a disaster when I understood maths. In fact, when my doctor said it's frontal lobe damage, my first thought was brilliant. I've not had many thoughts since. Just look at the policies of Reform. They want to introduce a low flat rate of tax. I say, why complicate things with fairness? They're going to scrap net zero too. It's got nothing to do with taking money from the oil industry. Climate change is woke propaganda. I used to think it was real, when my head worked. They're also going to deport everybody. Genius. Who needs doctors? Well, I do, but who needs fruit pickers, delivery drivers, waiters, carers? Not us. Reform says that they will bring in more private provisions to make the NHS more efficient. Why have free healthcare when you can pay to survive? It's self-regulating. The sick die faster. Just frees up the queue, doesn't it? They're going to introduce health vouchers. Inspired. And with everybody not vaccinated, it's the perfect solution, isn't it? Some might say the final solution. Nothing says modern Britain like handing your chemotherapy invoice to a nectar card machine. I strongly believe that we should have zero tolerance on crime because I read it on the internet. Because that way white collar crime will be seen as entrepreneurial. Whereas poor people shoplifting baby formula will go straight to Guantanamo Bay. It is vital that we have cultural cohesion. All food must be unseasoned and bland. Everything has to come in a pie. And the only entertainment that should ever be available to us is a bunch of people singing Mr. Brightside in a pub on a Friday night. Since my severe traumatising head injury, I too want to bring back the glory days. Empire, dying of preventable diseases, it being legal to rape your wife, gay people not being allowed to be married, living in slums, being proud to be bigoted, shagging flags. And just look at the calibre of people that I will be joining. Lucy Connolly, the woman jailed for racial hatred after calling for asylum seeker hotels to be burned down. Before the injury, I thought that she was a racist terrorist. Now I see her as a freedom fighter for people who hate freedom. Something we can all aspire to be. Should count myself lucky though, really. I was, after all, kicked in the head by a horse, and not by James McMurdoch, the Reform MP who was jailed for assaulting his girlfriend, who was only sacked after irregularities in his finances. I got battered by a horse, she got battered by a guy that would end up running for reform. Before the accident, I thought that Lee Anderson was a zig and zag character gone wrong, a caricature of 1970s Britain like Bernard Manning. When I heard that Times audio, where he talked about being offered money to join a party that sounded a lot like reform, I used to think that was corruption. Now I see it as a really easy way to make money. My life has become a lot easier since I started playing politics on easy mode. I don't read books anymore. Too many facts. These days I get my news exclusively from memes on Facebook, shared by old ladies who think that Muslims are trying to ban Christmas. I think every headline now is real. I do worry that I have become a hypocrite, but then I remember that that word has too many syllables for anyone that is in reform to understand the meaning of. But every time I lose another brain cell, I feel closer to Richard Tice, to the point that I've started calling heat pumps left-wing radiators. I have to say that since my empathy left, since my critical thinking is gone, and since my logic became scrambled like my poor diseased brain, I've never felt more British. Because patriotism isn't about wanting to make your country better, no. It's about blaming everything you can on a minority to deflect from the failings of rich people, of governments, of policy. Because poverty isn't a policy failure. It's what happens when people just don't try hard enough. I used to think compassion was a virtue. Now it's just the gateway drug to socialism. Empathy makes you soft and weak. Hating foreigners buys you a mansion. It's so much easier when everything that you hate, that sexually confuses you, that you don't understand, can just be called woke. Billionaires don't hoard wealth. They're visionaries. Yeah, people die and get sick. But you know, that's capitalism. Trickle-down economics is not a myth. People just don't understand how water works. Water's also woke. You see, reform treats compassion like it's a pre-existing condition. And if you have those under their privatised NHS, you're gonna die. But since mine has been robbed from me by the incident, I'm fully covered. So in the next election, don't vote with your heart. Get kicked in the head by a horse. Because as I'm proving, you don't need a functioning frontal lobe to run for office. It's easier this way. Thinking hurts. Well, especially now. And I've decided if it all goes wrong, I can just do what Britain does best. Blame Europe, blame immigrants, blame the weather, which is woke. Anything but myself. Because that horse didn't just kick me, it woke me up. Now I can see the light. So vote for me as your reform candidate. Together we can heal the nation by destroying its conscience. Because the things that make this country great aren't inclusion, diversity, culture, it's hate. Nothing puts the great in Great Britain like dying politely whilst waving a flag. Talking of which, I'm off to fuck mine now. Until next time, don't have nightmares.